Hey, everybody. Hello, my name is Bruce Bloom. I'm the Chief Scientific Officer at Kabuki Syndrome Foundation. I am happy to be here to introduce our webinar today as we explore the innovations in Kabuki Syndrome diagnosis. So just want to give you a little bit of background about Kabuki Syndrome Foundation. So at KSF, as we call it, we've developed a roadmap leading to treatments for Kabuki syndrome, and we call that LEAP, L-E-A-P, and the acronym stands for the four arms of our plan. L is for the learn about the root causes and symptoms of Kabuki syndrome. E is for enable collaboration to drive more efficient research. A is for accelerating promising therapeutic candidates to patients as quickly as possible. And P is for preparing for the clinical trials. Each one of these arms is important in our mission to find treatments for Kabuki syndrome. And today we're going to focus on what we are doing for the P, the preparing for clinical trials. So we're preparing for clinical trials by identifying, engaging, and empowering patients to participate in research. We have several programs that support that goal, and today we're going to be talking about progress being made to improve diagnosis. When we talk about preparing for clinical trials by improving diagnosis for Kabuki syndrome, what we mean is that we want everyone who has Kabuki syndrome to be able to be diagnosed quickly and accurately. This means helping everyone who is undiagnosed to find their Kabuki syndrome diagnosis. And it also means helping people get a more accurate diagnosis if they are clinically diagnosed or if they have a genetic variant of unknown significance. Improved diagnosis is part of our strategic roadmap because it improves the outcome of people living with Kabuki syndrome, and it leads to an increased therapeutic development. If more people are diagnosed with Kabuki syndrome, this will help us verify an increased prevalence of the disease. Prevalence measures the number of people with the disease in a population, and this statistic is used by biotech and other industry partners during cost analysis to determine if they're going to invest in Kabuki syndrome research. So this number is very important, not only to us to identify our community, but also to people who are going to help our community. The higher the prevalence, the more attractive we are to industry, and the clearer the diagnosis, the better it is for each of the patients, not only for participating in clinical care, but also in participating in clinical research. It increases the pool of eligible candidates for clinical trials. The more we know about your diagnosis, the more we can decide whether you qualify for particular clinical trials. And many clinical trials fail due to low participation in the patient community. So if we increase our pool of eligible candidates, we also increase the probability of clinical trial success. In addition, more people in the Kabuki syndrome community allows us to advocate for more funding and more resources when policy decisions are being made. All of these ultimately lead to an increase in therapeutic development, and in turn, what we all want, which is an increase in the quality of life for people living with Kabuki syndrome. So it's now my pleasure to introduce your experts for today's presentation. So improved diagnosis is important for the whole community, but it's also about educating our community about how accurate diagnosis can empower each and every one of us to navigate our clinical care. No matter your diagnostic type, we have information that's going to be applicable to you today. So our first presenter is going to be Dr. Jessica Weatherstone. She's going to be going over the history of Kabuki syndrome diagnosis and the current options for genetic testing. Our keynote speaker is Dr. Helen Lessman, who's going to give her talk titled The Faces of Kabuki Syndrome, How Gestalt Matcher Can Help with Diagnosis. Very interesting. Then Dr. Clara Tang, our Director of Research, will explain how You can help shape the future of Kabuki syndrome diagnostics by participating in Gestalt Matcher. And our last segment, we're so excited to have a talk by KSF Research Ambassador Kristen Anzelk about her diagnostic odyssey and her experience participating in Gestalt Matcher. Then we'll close with a live question and answer. So if you have questions throughout any of these presentations, be sure to put those in the question and answer box on the screen, and we will do our best to answer those at the end. Jessica, all yours.
Thank you, Bruce. My name is Jessica Weatherstone. I am mom to Emma, who is 10 years old and has Kabuki syndrome. And I'm really excited to talk to you guys today about innovations in Kabuki syndrome diagnosis. But first, we're going to start by setting the stage and kind of explaining what the current options are for genetic testing. So, like Bruce said, we want to make sure everyone with Kabuki syndrome has access to an accurate diagnosis. And there are several diagnosis types, but the most accurate one is currently a genetic diagnosis. This diagnosis is based on differences found in the DNA of the genetic sequence. For Kabuki syndrome, this difference is found in KMT2D or KDM6A, which are the two known genes to cause Kabuki syndrome. There are many benefits to having a genetic diagnosis, and these include being able to refine your treatment options, avoid unnecessary tests, and provide you with a more accurate prognosis based on not only on the type of Kabuki syndrome that you have, but even based on the type of variant in the DNA that they find. So having a genetic diagnosis can empower you and families when they're making reproductive decisions, because if you know what's causing the Kabuki syndrome, a genetic counselor can advise you on the likelihood of passing the syndrome on to future children. One of the biggest benefits of having a genetic diagnosis is having the opportunity to participate in clinical research, because most clinical trials require a genetic diagnosis in order to participate. Having a genetic diagnosis in hand can ensure that you or your loved one is able to enjoy the benefits of participating in clinical research, including the exciting opportunity that we will talk about later in the webinar. In addition to these benefits, some people report that doctors and family members take their diagnosis more seriously once they had a genetic confirmation. Some parents even experience a sense of relief knowing that the cause of their child's health problems is genetic and not something that they did or did not do as a parent. So genetic confirmation of your diagnosis can be powerful. So you might be asking, why would anyone have anything other than a genetic diagnosis? Well, to answer this, we have to look at the history of Kabuki syndrome. Kabuki syndrome was first described in 1981 in Japan. Doctors noticed stereotypical facial features and symptoms in some of their patients. And that's what they used to characterize Kabuki syndrome because they didn't know what was causing it. So they used these features and symptoms to diagnose Kabuki syndrome. And it wasn't until 2010 and 2012 that the two genes known to cause Kabuki syndrome were discovered. So anyone who was diagnosed with Kabuki syndrome before 2010 was given what we call a clinical diagnosis. A clinical diagnosis is based only on the clinical features such as symptoms and facial features. This kind of diagnosis was the only type of diagnosis available prior to the early 2010s. And this is based on 5 clinical categories: facial features, heart, kidney, microcephaly, which is a small head, and short stature. Because the symptoms of Kabuki syndrome can vary so widely, for example, my daughter only has symptoms in 2 of these categories. A clinical diagnosis isn't as accurate as a genetic diagnosis. So now getting a genetic diagnosis is considered best practice. If you have a clinical diagnosis and would like to move forward with genetic testing, you and your provider can explore genetic testing options to decide which test is best for your situation. Genetic testing usually requires a blood draw or a saliva sample so that the lab can sequence your DNA. DNA is made up of nucleotides, which can be thought of as letters. So DNA sequencing is just when they figure out the order of those letters in your DNA. The lab can compare the patient's sequence to what they see in the general population. And if there are any differences between the patient's sequence and what they expect based on the general population, they call that a mutation or a variant. So there are several genetic tests that can test for variations in the two genes that cause Kabuki syndrome, KMT2D and KDM6A. The first kind of test is targeted gene sequencing. This test only sequences the two genes associated with Kabuki syndrome, and it can only diagnose Kabuki syndrome. The second type of test is a panel test. This test sequences the genes for Kabuki syndrome as well as genes for a group of other conditions that have similar presentation or symptoms. So common Kabuki syndrome panel tests would test for Charge syndrome, Larsen syndrome, Klein syndrome, and others. And there are multiple labs and multiple different kind of panel tests that can be used. So it depends on which panel you use as to which other genes would be tested. This test is designed to diagnose Kabuki syndrome as well as a limited other number of disorders. Next, we have whole exome sequencing. This is a more comprehensive test that sequences the most important parts, protein coding regions, of the DNA. So this test is designed to give you information about the genes that cause Kabuki syndrome, as well as many, many other genes. And then our last type is whole genome sequencing. So this is the most comprehensive test. It sequences all of the DNA, the protein coding regions and the non-protein coding regions. And this is the most thorough test to give us information about differences anywhere in the DNA. So it can diagnose Kabuki syndrome as well as a host of other conditions. So there are some common genetic tests that do not usually detect Kabuki syndrome. And these phenotype, fluorescence in situ hybridization, otherwise known as FISH, and microarray. These tests are just not sensitive enough to detect the small changes that usually cause Kabuki syndrome. So if you've had one of these tests and it came back negative, it doesn't necessarily mean you do not have Kabuki syndrome. So you may want to look into one of these more sensitive tests. If you're interested in getting a genetic diagnosis, you can talk to your care provider about what kind of test would be best for your situation. And you can also visit our website where we have more information about how to access testing. And I'll have Amanda put a link in the chat so you can access that easily. You can always email us at info@kabukisyndromefoundation.org if you have questions or if you're having trouble accessing testing, and we can direct you to resources. So for those of you who have already gone through genetic testing, some of you may have experienced receiving a result that says you have a variant of unknown significance, otherwise known as a VUS. This is what my family received when we were first diagnosed back in 2015, and it was very confusing at the time, so I wanted to take a minute to touch on VUS, what it is, and how you can get that converted to a genetic diagnosis. A variant of unknown significance is the difference in a genetic sequence that may or may not cause Kabuki syndrome. So they've compared your sequence with those of the general population. They found that there's a difference, there's a variant, but they just aren't sure if it's causing Kabuki syndrome or not because it hasn't been reported before and there's no data. So there are two ways that they can prove if this variant is causing it. The first way is through parental testing. With this method, they test both biological parents for the variant that's found in the child. And if both parents are healthy, they don't show any signs of Kabuki syndrome, and neither have the same variant that's found in the child, then we can assume the variant is what is causing the symptoms and causing the Kabuki syndrome in the child. So then they can declare that mutation is no longer a VUS, it's what we call a pathogenic variant, meaning it causes Kabuki syndrome. Another test that they can do to confirm a VUS is methylation signature testing. A methyl group is just a chemical group, and it's like a little flag that the cell uses, and it puts on the DNA to mark where it wants to turn on the genes. So we have these little methyl groups or flags on our DNA, and we all have that. But people with Kabuki syndrome have a unique pattern of these methyl groups, and we call this methylation signature. So if you have a VUS, they can test the methylation signature to see if the pattern of flags is more like what they see with people with Kabuki syndrome or more like what they see in the general population. And if the pattern is consistent with what they see with people with Kabuki syndrome, then we can declare that variant as pathogenic and move ahead with giving a genetic diagnosis. So if you are someone who has a VUS and you would like genetic confirmation of your diagnosis, you can find information on our website to help guide the conversation with your provider about additional testing. My family did this through the parental testing method, and we were really glad we did because this has allowed us to participate in clinical research. And we've also met people with the same variant that my daughter has, and they didn't have to go through that extra testing because we had already confirmed that the variant was pathogenic. So it's a good way to give back and help others who will be diagnosed with Kabuki syndrome in the future as well. So that's where we stand for the current options for diagnosing Kabuki syndrome. But this webinar is about innovations in diagnosis. So where are we headed in the future? KSF is driving research that has the potential to improve Kabuki syndrome diagnostics. One area of research is a fingerprint study coming out of Hans Borgenson's lab. And some of you may have participated in this study at the UK, Texas, or Seattle gathering. This study is looking at the fingerprints of people with Kabuki syndrome to see if they are unique enough to be able to diagnose Kabuki syndrome. And they've actually found some really interesting results. So they're almost ready for publication, and we will keep you posted and updated as soon as that data is published. We want to thank the siblings, parents, and people with Kabuki syndrome who participated in this study via KSF. Another project is Gestalt Matcher, which uses AI to compare pictures of people with Kabuki syndrome to find similarities that could be used to facilitate Kabuki syndrome diagnosis. We all know that AI has made huge strides in the past years, and it's really exciting that we can leverage this technology to help people with Kabuki syndrome. This is what we are going to focus on for the rest of the webinar. So with that, I would like to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Helen Lestman. She is a resident physician at the Institute of Human Genetic Biomedical Center at University of Bonn. She has worked closely with the Kabuki Syndrome Foundation on Gestalt Matcher project, and she will be telling us about Gestalt Matcher, how it works, and its power in Kabuki syndrome research. So with that, I will switch to Helen.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me well? Yeah, I hope so. Okay, yeah. Thank you for inviting me. And my name is Helen Lessmann, as Jessica already introduced myself. And I'm a medical doctor in the Human Genetics Department in Bonn, in Germany. And I'm really happy to talk about our project Gestalt Matcher today. And as Jessica already said, it's an AI-based tool that can predict a disorder from a facial photograph. So the title of my today's presentation is The Phases of Kabuki Syndrome and How Gestalt Matcher Can Help with the Diagnosis. And today's content will be that I would like to start with the phases of Kabuki Syndrome, meaning how is the facial phenotype in a patient different between individuals, and how does this affect the diagnosis? I would also like to give you a short introduction into how the Gestalt Matcher AI does actually work. And I would give you a little bit of information on what the Gestalt Matcher database is. It's the training set for the Gestalt Matcher AI. And as it's research project, we are of course also looking for people who would be willing to participate here. So I would also talk shortly about the possibilities here, what is possible to do. Yeah. So next slide, please. Yeah, this could be the face of a typical person being diagnosed with Kabuki syndrome, but actually this patient does not exist. It's a fake image created with artificial intelligence, and it's based on facial images of healthy individuals and images of patients with a diagnosis of Kabuki syndrome. So the AI learns some of the facial features, which are often occurring in Kabuki syndrome. So some of the basic features are the rather long palpable facial, the long palpable fissures with the eversion of the lateral third of the lower lip that you often see, and short columella. This is the part of the nose that we call here the columella, with a depressed nasal tip. And also sometimes you see that the ears are a little bit larger than normal and sometimes a little bit cupped. Also the eyebrows are a little bit higher arched, and sometimes the lateral third is sparse, and they're sometimes a little bit broader. And historically, as Jessica already told you, that the diagnosis of Kabuki syndrome was really dependent on the recognition of the characteristic facial gestalt. Today, we also have the chance of genetic testing, but still the facial phenotype is part of the diagnostic criteria. But of course, not all patients with Kabuki syndrome look the same. So even if there are some distinct similarities, everyone has, of course, inherited facial features from their parents. That has nothing to do with the genetic variant in the Kabuki syndrome genes. But also the Kabuki syndrome specific features evolve over time and make the clinical diagnosis of Kabuki syndrome more challenging. So this is what we can clearly see from the next images. On the next slide, yeah, there you see this is a patient. These are images from a publication that is open access, and this clearly shows how the facial features evolve over time. So it's basically like they are most apparent in the early childhood between the age 3 and 12 years, and less extent in neonates, in infants and adults. And yeah, this is what you can see in this picture. But what we also know is that the facial phenotype also dependent on which of the Kabuki syndrome genes is affected. So this is what Jessica also already told you, that there are 2 genes that are mainly associated with Kabuki syndrome, the KMT2D gene associated with Kabuki syndrome type 1 and KDM6A gene associated with the Kabuki syndrome type 2. And it is more that Kabuki syndrome type 1 has more this typical facial phenotype, but with the Kabuki syndrome type 2, it's a little bit, yeah, it's not that easy because the affected patients often show lesser the typical facial Kabuki syndrome features. So this is also what you can see here in these pictures from open source publication. There you can see a lot of patients with Kabuki syndrome 2, and you can see that that they are separated by the genetic effect on the protein. So if it's a truncating protein or if it's an altered protein. And you can see that the facial phenotype difference between those, and it's also different between the sex of the patients. So it's difference between girls and boys, and between the specific genetic reasons why they have this disorder. And this is what we see a lot, because the sex is quite interesting marker. So we see that girls are often less affected with Kabuki syndrome 2 facial features, or they're not that apparent in them. And these differences make it really hard for clinicians sometimes to find an early diagnosis. So how can AI help here, and what does AI really mean? So many people think of science fiction movies and robots, but yeah, actually we use artificial intelligence every day. So for example, if you use search engine and already receive suggestions for your search, if you receive advertising that is tailored to you, when you speak to Siri, when you unlock your smartphone with your fingerprint or with your face. And these are a few examples. And our research is based on a similar technology to the facial recognition in smartphones. So this technology has been further developed so that instead of recognizing a person, it can recognize syndromes. Next slide, please. And yeah, now I would like to dive a little bit deeper into the Gestalt Matcher algorithm. So before the artificial intelligence can differentiate between the syndromes, it must first learn the syndromes, just like the doctor. So this requires a large data set with patients who already have a diagnosis. And the more images there are in these data sets, the better the AI can actually recognize the similarities. So if we assume that the patient on the left side does not have yet been diagnosed, then we show his picture to the AI. It ends up suggesting Kabuki syndrome in the first place as a diagnosis for this patient. And what you also can see there on the right, it's that it shows us which is the most similar patient in this training set. But how does Gestalt Matcher do that? So therefore, I would like to also dive a little bit deeper into that. So if you put it simply, the features of the face are processed somehow mathematically, and then they can be arranged in a multidimensional space. So each point in this space is therefore a patient. And the closer the points are to each other, the more similar the facial features are. So our patient here is shown as a yellow dot, and the other yellow dots represent other patients who have already been diagnosed with Kabuki syndrome. And the distance to the other yellow dots is smaller in contrast to the other colored dots, and they represent a different syndrome. And this means that the similarity of the facial features to the Kabuki cases is high. This means that the unknown diagnosis can be assigned to known syndromes. And you can do this by matching the most similar patient. So, however, it is also possible to assign, can we go back, please? We can also assign undiagnosed cases to each other. So if there are several cases without a diagnosis that are close to each other in this room, that's what you see with the black dots here. And this information can be used to check whether these patients are suffering from the same previously unknown disease. So this can also mean that new disorders can be detected more quickly. So next slide, please. And to train an AI like Gestalt Matcher, a large database is very important. So therefore, we built the Gestalt Matcher database, or short GMDB. This is an online repository of curated case reports with image data of patients with rare disorders from all over the world. And its access is restricted and controlled. So only members of the scientific community can sign up. Next slide, please. And clinicians can use the gallery view, which you can see here. I've blurred the patients because of the access control. And they can search for a specific gene or disorder of interest, and then they will get all the cases in the database at a glance, and which is really great for clinicians to compare, to learn the facial phenotype of the disorder, and also, of course, in respect to the differences in the phenotype regarding age, sex, and the ancestry. So in the research platform, this is our next slide. This is also something that they can do. They can analyze patient cohorts. So here is an example of an analysis I did with Kabuki syndrome, but you don't have to understand this in detail. But what you could think of it is that we can do this analysis to compare the similarity of all these Kabuki syndrome patients, and this tells me how similar they are. So you see that these are like always a case. So every cell there is a case. They're compared with each other, and the darker the cell, the more similar they are. So if it's the same patient, it's a 0 in there, and then you have the ranks. So this is the 12th the 12th patient who's the 12th most similar patient to this patient, something like this. And if you see like, okay, these patients that are next to each other, they are very similar, then this can maybe be because they have the same genetic variant in the same Kabuki syndrome gene. And this can also help to define and to learn more about the Kabuki syndrome phenotype. So next slide, please. In the GMDB, if you want to participate, there are 2 ways. So you can upload your data publicly, which publicly meaning that you can do it under the access control within the Gestalt Matcher database that I mentioned before. And this means that the registered GMDB users from the scientific community can see it in the gallery and they can do research with it. And that also it will be used for training Gestalt Matcher AI, and that also other scientific groups can use it to train their own AI models. But this is only possible if they apply for it. And they, of course, have to give us their IRB approval. So we can only apply for it if they have an IRB approval, and then our board will decide if it's possible to use the data for training. And you could also, if you don't want to share it with everyone, that's also totally fine. You can say like, okay, I want to participate, but I just want to be part of Gestalt Matcher. And then you can upload a private case. Then your uploading clinician can see your case. You can see the case. Your uploading clinician can do some research in the research platform. And it will be still part of the Gestalt Matcher AI training set. And this is the current status of our GMDB. So we have over 10,500 patients right now in the database. A lot of them come from publications where we created the photographs. But as you see in the figure B, that our data is not really balanced. We have most of patients coming or having European ancestry, which is kind of a problem, because as you see from the map above, that the birth rates are the highest in other countries. So you see some marks there. There you see where most of our collaborators come from, but the data is kind of not really balanced. We need more data from all over the world. And for Kabuki syndrome, you can see the numbers on the right side. So right now we have quite over 200 images of Kabuki syndrome patients. But ancestry distribution is that we have almost 60% are European descent. And then we also have more of Asians, but this is not really balanced. So also ethnicity is influencing the facial features, as you might already known, and this can influence the performance of the AI. Next slide, please. So how can Gestalt Matcher and Gestalt Matcher database help in diagnosing Kabuki? So like I said, its facial phenotype can be used for prediction. So in primary care, the doctor can use it to diagnose a patient. Of course, it can only assist. It's not a tool for diagnosis, but it can assist. And it can therefore match patients. So with this most similar patient, you can match patient, and this can enable research collaboration. And what is also possible is that you can include these scores that you get from the distance between the cases. You can include this into variant interpretation. So if you take a look at the next slide, then we see that if you do genome analysis, you will find a lot of genetic variants in a lot of different genes. And then you have all these specific variants, but most of them are not the cause of your disorder. And therefore, you need to figure out which one is the one that is the reason for it. And therefore, you need to somehow filter and prioritize. And you can use these Gestalt scores to see which Gestalt score would fit to my diagnosis. And you can also incorporate other information, other phenotype information in here. So this is also possible. Next slide. Yeah, so which kind of data do we store? As I said, there are a lot of confounding factors such as the age, the ancestry, the sex. So this is all the data that we need. We, of course, are looking for image data, and we have to have the age for each image. The ancestry is a great information that we can use, and also the sex of the patient. And for each file, you can state the privacy. Should it be shown to someone else from the Gestalt Matcher community, or should it just be shown to the uploading clinician and the Gestalt Matcher team? And the next slide. And of course, we also need the information on the diagnosed disorder, the molecular information, including which disease gene do we have, which test was conducted, and what is the actual genetic variant. And then we also prefer having some more phenotypic information, because not all of the facial, or not all of the features are seen in the face. We also have, of course, other symptoms in Kabuki syndrome. So this would also be of interest for us. So if you want to participate, then this would be some of the things that we need. So the image data with the age for each image, and the laboratory testing results with the genetic variant and the disease gene. And sometimes in these reports, they also have these phenotypic terms that you saw. Sometimes you can also see that in the doctor's letters for the phenotype, but this is not something that we actually do need. It's not mandatory to participate, but if you have it, then also be of interest for us. Yeah. So with that, I'm already at the end of my talk. I'm a little bit over time, I'm sorry. So thank you for your attention, and yeah, I'm looking forward for the Q&A later. And I should hand over to Clara now.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you so much for a great talk. And we're so excited to be working with you as we launch the recruitment of Gestalt Matcher today. So my name is Clara Tang, and I'm the Director of Research at the Kabuki Syndrome Foundation. I'm going to walk you through Gestalt Matcher, how it works, and how you can sign up to participate. So in order to participate in Gestalt Matcher, you must have a genetic diagnosis of Kabuki syndrome type 1 or type 2. So if you only have a clinical diagnosis or a VOS that Jessica talked about earlier, now is the time to start talking to your care provider about getting a genetic diagnosis. The patient or legal guardian of the person with Kabuki syndrome must be able to understand English or German so that they can complete the consent form to consent to the study. We will keep you updated when additional languages are available. People of any age, sex, race, or ethnicity can participate, and we highly encourage racial minorities to participate because having people from these different backgrounds is essential to more accurately train the AI algorithm, as Helen mentioned. If you are a participant in our Kabuki syndrome biomarker and outcome measure consortium, otherwise known as KSOC, we will be asking you to participate in Gestalt Matcher so we can explore correlating facial features with the biomarkers we are developing in that study. So it is important that we get as many KSOC participants as possible to upload photos into the Gestalt Matcher database. We don't have time to go into the importance of validating these biomarkers today, but if you would like to learn more about KSOC, you can visit our website, and I'll have Amanda put a link in the chat now. So to participate in Gestalt Matcher, there are 5 easy steps. So the first step is to fill out the KSF Gestalt Matcher interest form. And at this stage, you are just expressing your interest when you are filling in this form. You are not participating in the study. When you fill out this form, you are just agreeing to be contacted by Gestalt Matcher with more information about the study. This form is very straightforward and should only take a minute to fill out with your email, name of the person with Kabuki syndrome, name of the guardian if applicable, and your clinical research ID, your CRID number. So the CRID number is probably the only piece of information you may not have on hand, but we have put a link in the form so you can easily look it up or create one in less than a minute. After you fill out this form, KSF will connect you with a representative from Gestalt Matcher who will send you a link with information about how to consent and enroll in the study. Through this link, you will be able to read the consent form and fill it out online. Then you will be ready to start by uploading your genetic report, and we recommend that you upload the whole report and that families have a personal copy of their genetic report because it is useful in so many different situations. And if you do not have a personal copy, that is a good excuse to get one from your doctor or geneticist and keep it on file in the future. You can either upload the report as a PDF, or if you only have a hard copy, you can take a picture of your phone of the report with your phone and then upload it that way. And then now you're ready for the fun part, which is uploading the photos. So when you're uploading your photos on Gestalt Matcher, you will come to a page that looks like this. You can upload photos from your computer or phone, and then you fill in the age, photo type, and the privacy fields for each photo. And most of this is pretty self-explanatory, but when you sign up, we will also send you a step-by-step guide to make sure the process is as easy as possible. We're looking for clear, high-resolution photos that are either straight on, so what we call it a frontal face, or from the side, called profile. We also need photos of the same person from different ages, and we're hoping that you will upload at least 5 photos per person. Some tips and tricks. As we mentioned, you can either upload from your computer or phone, whichever is more convenient for you. If you have older printed photos that you want to upload, you can scan them or take a picture of it with your phone. Then when you're taking a photo of the printed photo, make sure to do this in a well-lit area. But at the same time, try to avoid any glare, especially for those glossy photos. Get as close to the photo as possible so you can maximize the resolution of the photo. So this is the process for participating in Gestalt Matcher. And I'm going to have Amanda put the link to the interest form in the chat right now. So if you're interested, you can go ahead and fill that out. And I'm sure you all will have some questions that we'll be happy to answer in the Q&A later. And first, we're going to bring on somebody who has recently participated in Gestalt Matcher to tell us about her experience and tell us about her diagnostic odyssey. And I'd like to welcome Kristen Nelmzek to the stage. Kristen is a Kabuki Syndrome ambassador here at KSF, and she also does a lot of volunteer work in the Kabuki Syndrome community, including planning the Mid-Atlantic Kabuki family gathering. Hi, Kristen, welcome.
Hi, thank you. Like Clara said, I'm Kristen, and I'm very excited to be able to do this.
Great. Thank you, Kristen. So, Kristen, let's start from the beginning. When were you first diagnosed with Kabuki syndrome?
I was first diagnosed at age 11, which was in 1996, at a retreat that I was attending for kids who were born with cleft lips and cleft palates through Hopkins. And then I had the clinical diagnosis for years, for about 6 years by itself. And then in 2012 was when we got the genetic testing done down at Hopkins. So that's when I had the genetic confirmation.
That's great. So you did, get a clinical diagnosis, and then when genetic testing was available, then you got a genetic diagnosis. And how did getting that diagnosis affect you and your family?
Initially, I was very relieved to have it, because at 11 years old, like, you're different because you're not like everybody else. So it's like, why is this? Like, no one has been able to give me the answers yet. And then at that camp I attended for the first time, and then he was like, have you ever heard of this? Because I've been doing some reading on it, and you meet many of the classic characteristics. And then I'm like, and I felt like finally someone is able to give us what we need or what I need. And then at least for me, I felt that way. Others in my family did not feel the same way. And then in 2012, when I had the genetic confirmation done, that's when it was finally like, okay, she had this. We know that she had this. We can kind of like move on.
Great. So why did you decide that you wanted to get a genetic diagnosis, even though you already had a clinical diagnosis?
For us, the reason that we got the genetic diagnosis is honestly, like, I had the clinical diagnosis, the genetic testing was available at Hopkins, which is about half an hour away from me. So we got connected with them, and then we ended up going down and doing the genetic testing down there.
Great. So one of the benefits of having a genetic diagnosis is that you're able to participate in clinical research. Have you participated in any clinical trials or studies?
I have done quite a few actually. I've done a case talk and I also have participated in Gestalt Matcher. But in addition to that, I've done various blood work for other studies. I did the diet trial through Kennedy Krieger. I did a hearing survey also from down at Kennedy Krieger. And so I've done quite a few different studies, all since 2021 actually.
That's great. And thank you so much for your contribution to research. Have those been good experiences for you?
They have been phenomenal experiences for me, especially because I have very difficult veins. So I used to be terrified of blood work, but now doing all of these research studies, which include a lot of blood work, has made me more confident in sharing like doing blood work now, because now I know what to do. I know what to tell I know what to tell the lab tech. And with the diet trial, I was really nervous about it because I really like my carbs a lot. But it was very easy to participate. And then also for one of the skin biopsies that I did for the St. Jude research study, I was very nervous about it at first because the doctor said that she would have to numb my leg with lidocaine beforehand, and I was really nervous about that because of negative experience that I have had prior. But it was very easy, and she was like, you know what, I'll be here, I'll be doing the study, like I'll be doing the biopsy, I'll walk you through it. And I think it was helpful to have that because she and I had already established a very good relationship. Like I had met her in 2012 when I was genetically diagnosed because she was doing a fellowship under my geneticist.
That's great. I'm glad those experiences are very positive. So you mentioned that Gestalt Matcher was one of the studies in which you participated. Why did you decide to participate in Gestalt Matcher?
For me, when I first kind of started talking about it with KSF, when I was approached about doing it, that really kind of took me back to where I initially was diagnosed. Because when I was clinically diagnosed, they used a lot of my facial features, like the wide set eyes, the hands, the beautiful eyes, and like all of that. So it was like this. So when I was approached about doing this, I'm like, you know what? This reminds me of what it was when I was younger, so I really want to help this. And also, I knew that I was making an impact because I want to make an impact on people, like no matter what I do. And I saw this was another way to do that.
Well, thank you so much, Kristen. Was it easy to participate in Gestalt Matcher?
It was very easy to participate because once I had filled out the form, at least for me, it was easy because we have a copy of my genetic test results in the genetics folder, which is in my room. So the genetic test results was right there in the front. And then I easily located pictures that I had both on my computer and then also some paper photographs that I had as well, hard copy photographs. It was
That's
very
great.
easy.
And so actually overall, how long did it take you?
Once I had everything that I needed, it took about half an hour to upload everything. Once I had found everything.
That's great. And was there anything about the process that was difficult?
For me, there was nothing really difficult about it because we took photos with my phone and then I also took a picture of the genetic report with my phone, which I'm very comfortable with taking pictures on my phone. So it was very easy for me to just do that and you just log into the website and upload them that way.
That's great to hear. So yeah, thank you so much, Kristen. It's so nice to hear from somebody who has participated in this project. So now we're going to bring back the rest of our panelists for a Q&A. And I think, Bruce, over to you.
I am going to moderate the Q&A. First question is for Jessica. How does Gestalt Matcher help get a diagnosis faster if the patient still needs genetic testing?
Well, the AI kind of takes the place of the clinician in recognizing what syndrome a patient might um, be having. So for us, when we went to go get diagnosed, we went to a geneticist and she took a look at my daughter and said, I think that that's Kabuki syndrome. And we were able to go get that targeted testing done very quickly. And in an ideal situation, everyone would be able to get whole exome or whole genome testing done, but that's just not the reality. So anyone who has the internet can upload their photo into this program and it can spit out, we think you maybe have Kabuki syndrome, and then go get that targeted testing that's much cheaper, much faster than getting the entire DNA sequenced. And in the US, the targeted genetic testing for Kabuki syndrome is relatively cheap. It's now only about $250 out of pocket, not even going through insurance. So that's much more accessible to people than having to pay thousands and thousands of dollars for these more expensive tests. So Gestalt Matcher can be really powerful to helping people narrow down their diagnosis to get that testing done.
Great. For Helen, what's the difference between PTV and PAVs?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I didn't explain that. What is the influence on the protein? So if you have a genetic variant, then this explains what is the influence. So the PTV is the protein truncating variant. So this variant will make the protein shorter, or you have the PAV, it's the protein altering variant. So you have a different amino acid code. Yeah, but it's very detailed knowledge.
Great, thanks. A couple quick questions for you, Helen, about the pictures. One question is, does it matter how far away the face is in the uploaded pictures? So answer that one first, and then we'll give you the next one.
It's so we have, for training the Gestalt Matcher AI, it has a cropper installed. So basically every picture will be cropped in this position, but it is better to already have it like in a portrait modus. That's the best thing, but we can also work with images that are a little bit farther away because we can crop it. Interesting is the angle of your face. It should not be more than 30 degrees. That's what we tested. But anyways, we are happy for all pictures. So if you're not sure about if it's a good picture, then you can always just ask or just upload it. And yeah.
Great. And
Great.
another picture question is, one of our participants said, my daughter had plastic surgery on her ears as a toddler. She's 36 years old now, so photos after age 4 won't reflect ear abnormalities. Can she still participate in Gestalt Matcher?
Yes, that is also possible. We have that for a lot of genetic disorders where there might have been some operations in the face. We usually just state that in the case report. So every uploaded patient data we refer to as a case report. So we will say that in the notes that there was something done, and then this is also fine.
Great. Jessica, a question for you. My physician doesn't want to order genetic testing. What can I do?
So we have resources on the KSF website. If you go to our diagnosis page, that you can bring to your physician. Most physicians don't have a lot of experience with rare disease, and some of them might not understand some of the nuances. They might not know that we have therapies in the pipeline that are going to possibly be entering clinical trials, and that you need that genetic confirmation to participate. So we just recommend bringing them some of that information. Or you can also see a geneticist or a Kabuki syndrome specialist that are going to be more up to date with some of the things going on in Kabuki syndrome research.
Great, thanks. Helen, somebody asked a question, what kind of securities does Gestalt Matcher have to protect my photos?
Yeah, we have this access control. So we do not allow people that are not from the scientific community to access the data. They have to ask us first if they can get access, and therefore they have to verify that they belong to the scientific community. And if they have verified, then they can access. And they can also invite their colleagues, but it's just working on invite. It's not that someone else can get inside. We are also working on implementing something into every picture that we have this, we will hide some code in every picture. So if someone shares or takes some of the photos for something else that is not allowed, he or she was not allowed to, then we can trace back this person with this hidden code. But this is something we're still working on. But yeah.
And Helen, somebody wants to know, can they participate in Gestalt Matcher without a genetic diagnosis?
For this phase right now, we are really looking for people who have a diagnosis and who have a genetic diagnosis where we know which genetic variants there are. But for the future, it would also be possible that if you don't have one, or also if you have a VUS, because we think that in the future we might also figure out new disease genes maybe in different syndromes with this technology, because we can do the matching. So and if you are registered in the database without having a diagnosis or the specific diagnosis because you don't have the genetic disorder, then this might be something to see like a patient registry as well. But this is more for the future. And if you only have the clinical diagnosis, normally we would say we really need the disease gene. But if you are willing to participate, I think we can also manage that, and be great. Yeah.
Last question for Kristen. Kristen, were you able to see any benefits for participating in the diet trial at Kennedy Krieger?
I saw quite a few different benefits from it, because one of the things that helped me, they helped to give me more confidence with the blood draws, because I had to do them every 3 weeks. And then also while I was on it, I found that I had more energy on it. And it also kind of retrained me in how to eat, because before doing that, I would constantly be able to eat like huge plates of food. And now that I've done it, now 3 years later, I'm like, you know what? If I want a little bit of food, I'll take a little bit, but I'm not going to take a lot. And then if I want to get more, I can go back and get more. But so I definitely found that it helped me a lot.
Thanks for sharing, and thanks to all of our experts. We're gonna end the webinar. We do have some questions that were unanswered, but we will provide answers to you, to the community. So check on the website or watch for an email from us on how you can access those answers, and also I think how you can access a recording of this or share this with other people so that as many people as possible get these insights. I don't know who else wants to close the seminar. Jessica, is that you?
I have a few announcements. I just wanted to thank everyone for attending that webinar. I know we packed a lot of information in here, and I hope it was informative and helpful to you guys. I'd also like to thank our volunteers and those helping in the background, Amanda Gamboa and Corinne Stoba, who are helping with the chat. And thank you to our guests for your amazing talks. Please make sure to fill out that interest form if you would like to participate in Gestalt Matcher. And then after we close out the webinar, it will give you the option to take a short survey. So please click on that continue button. Just take 1 minute to fill that out, and it will really help us as we develop content for our community. So thank you again for spending your hour with us, and we will see you next time. Bye.